If you thought that Porsche didn't make the Speedster for the 993 generation of 911, well, you're forgiven, because it didn't, except for this one. This, of course, being a special one-of-one example created for Butzi Porsche, creator of the 911, given to him in 1995 to celebrate his 60th birthday. Like everything else that we've looked at here at Porsche Archive, this has such historical significance. It's a genuine pleasure to take a look around it today and show you this one-off 993 Speedster. Before we deep dive into the 993 known simply as Butzi Speedster, let's recap the history of the Porsche Speedster on the way to discovering why this one is so significant. There may well be 4 iterations of 911 Speedster, but Porsche's Speedster story started with this, the 356. Now, as you may or may not know, the 356 really represented the birth of Porsche as a manufacturer. The first one being built in Gmünd, Austria in 1948. It took 6 years though for this Speedster to arrive, and really it was a result of Porsche's attempt to break America. Ferry Porsche, who was in charge of this fledgling company that eventually would move to Zuffenhausen in 1950, befriended Max Hoffmann, who was well known as the US importer of exotic European cars. It was Max Hoffmann's advice to build the 356 Speedster in order to appeal to the American people. Mr. Hoffmann said the American market demanded a car that was open top, simple, pared back. And the result was this, the 356 Speedster. Instantly, an icon was born in terms of its design. The Speedster was immediately identifiable by this short, steeply raked windscreen, which, by the way, was removable. Its tonneau cover covering what was a pretty simple top. It was barely used, to be honest. And then inside, absolute Spartan spec in terms of equipment. This was a car that in particular would appeal to Californians with their sunnier climate. And do you know what? It worked. Despite this being an absolutely hand-built car, production of Speedsters peaked in 1957 with just over 1,100 models being produced. That essentially is it, and the Speedster legacy was set. However, it would take about 35 years for this Speedster ideology to transcend onto the 911, beginning of course with the 3.2 Carrera in 1989. That's right, the first 911 Speedster was introduced to sign off the G-Series or Impact Bumper generation, available for one model year only. Nearly all of the 2,104 models produced were wide-bodied and came with a coveted G50 gearbox, as well as what would become a customary, shorter, stubbier, steeply raked windscreen, which was removable for the purposes of racing. And how's this for a fact? The first 911 Speedster was originally designed for the 964 generation, but Porsche brought the model forward to 1989 to boost sales of the ailing G program, as told to me by the Speedster's designer Ben Dimpson. Anyway, Dimpson's Speedster would find its way into the 964 lineup, introduced in 1993. Just 936 examples were made, and it's this generation which best embodies the spirit of Max Hoffmann's original Speedster concept, being lightweight and minimalist in spec. For example, very nearly all 964 Speedsters were narrow-bodied and featured an RS spec interior with door pull straps and one-piece bucket seats, plus the smaller diameter Club Sport steering wheel. Alas, the 964 Speedster failed to inspire the buying public of the time, and the 911 Speedster model line was put to bed for 16 years until 2010, when Porsche's exclusive department unveiled the 997 Speedster. A total of 356 examples were made, with extremely high levels of craftsmanship available on the interior's extended leather pack, for example. But for me, the 997 is a disappointment in not staying remotely close to the original Speedster concept, with a lavish specification and even a PDK gearbox. However, the 997 Speedster remains a collector's gem today, so what do I know? Then, as a swan song to the 991 generation, Mr. Andreas Poininger, aka Mr. GT3, loving the textbook school style photo here by the way, gave us the 991 Speedster in 2018. 1,948 examples were made to celebrate 70 years of Porsche sports cars, and these examples are extremely sought after today. Essentially an open-top GT3, the 991 retained that sleek Speedster profile yet boasted bucket seats and a manual gearbox. And that's your Porsche Speedster history from 356 to 991, and as you can see, there's no mass production 993 in sight. Back to the star car of today's video then, because as I mentioned earlier, this Speedster was specially created for Butzi Porsche, the father of the 911, to to celebrate his 60th birthday in 1995. So let's take a closer look at the spec of this Aventurine Green 993. Okay, so this is based on a 993 generation 911. It's actually started life as a cabriolet. Now the cabriolet has a vastly different windscreen to the Speedster. This windscreen therefore was taken from, as you can probably tell, the 964 Speedster, the generation before it. Similarly, with the rear clamshell, this again is taken from the 964 Speedster generation for Butzi Porsche's one-off 993. It operates exactly the same as that 964 generation before it. The interior, of course, like everything else on this car, is totally unique. A dark brown, again, it's kind of a one-off trim. The seats are RS spec. The door cards, they're also RS spec. There's a really nice kind of wooden walnut trim in there, but perhaps most controversially of all, and again, despite all of this kind of Rennsport stuff in here, that transmission is a Tiptronic. So, the only factory Porsche Speedster in the world, made brand new, is a Tiptronic. This car has genuinely been driven on the public road. Butzi Porsche enjoyed this car for 17 years before his untimely passing in 2012. I believe the mileage is minuscule, 2,000 kilometres. I really encourage you to go on YouTube and take a look at some really grainy footage of Butzi enjoying this car in the snowy Alps with the roof down. Like I say, it's really old school retro footage, but definitely worth having a look to see this car bumbling through the Alpine roads. Butzi Porsche enjoying this very, very special one-off Speedster as intended. That 4-speed Tiptronic gearbox is something of a revelation, but in a way it suits the purpose for which Butzi would use it, with those aforementioned trips through the Alps. This is a Speedster built for laid-back touring between Porsche HQ in Germany and Butzi's home in Austria, with a neat storage compartment behind the seats stationed under the fiberglass clamshell, aiding practicality. Everything else on this special Speedster remains standard 993 Carrera specification, including its chassis and running gear. The car itself is a 1996 model year 993, which means it has the Type M64/22 naturally aspirated Carrera engine with Varioram technology, which of course debuted on the 993 RS of the previous model year, here producing 285 horsepower. Butzi Speedster is actually one of 2 993s created by the Porsche factory, the other made retrospectively for notorious Porsche collector and enthusiast Jerry Seinfeld. According to Porsche, Mr. Seinfeld took delivery of a specially created 993 C4S cab in 1998 from Porsche exclusive. By 2001, the car was returned to Germany to be transformed into a Speedster, adopting the same 964 Speedster spec windscreen and rear clamshell as Butzi's car. There are differences between the Seinfeld and Butzi 993 Speedsters though. The Seinfeld car is wide-bodied for a start, with a manual transmission and features larger 18-inch turbo wheels, whereas Butzi's is narrow-bodied with a Tiptronic gearbox and has the 17-inch wheels. But regardless, Butzi's car is the only 993 Speedster built from new by Porsche. It's worth pointing out too that Seinfeld sold his car a few years ago, while Butzi Speedster remains enshrined in the Porsche family collection, which is why it's the utmost privilege to be allowed anywhere near it. Super, super cool.